for IBM and Deutsche Telekom. Lived in Germany, Switzerland, and Croatia.
Very international too. But you're an American who lives in America, right?
I'm an American who now lives in America.
That's a little unusual for X-Culture, so you are a rarity. Normally we have a person who is something who lives somewhere else. So, but you do have a rich international background too, so I guess that almost, qualifies you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Who goes next?
I think, also, I think actually it depends on your computer. I think you're always on the left if it's you here. But what I thought was interesting is, Bruce, I'm actually at Penn State Barron, so just down the road. So here we are online on an international virtual team here, and we're actually in the same city. But anyway, I teach at Penn State Barron, which again is in Erie, Pennsylvania. And I've traveled a lot, so I've been to about almost 50 countries now. But in terms of actually living, I've lived 3 months in China. I lived a month in Prague last summer on sort of doing some sabbatical work. I do innovation management stuff, and I teach for the X-Culture. It's an international management class that I try to focus mostly on strategy, and then looking at more micro level aspects to it and how they relate back to the strategy. So I've done X-Culture before, as Vas knows, but it's been a few years actually. It's been a couple years, I think, since I was part of the program.
Bruce, can we also ask you 2 more questions? One, what is your research stream, or what area you do research in? And then also, I know that you participated before, but if you want to maybe mention that to others. And the reason I mentioned research is because, again, research is a huge part of X-Culture. I assume many of you are at research-intensive institutions. And so in addition to all the goodies we get from teaching, there are opportunities to write papers, and it's always good to know who does what to kind of identify potential co-authors.
I guess I participated in X-Culture before, but it was also just like, is it William or Bill?
Yeah, I usually go by Bill. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay.
But, I always tell my students Bill Johnson's very popular. So actually, William H.A. Johnson is my full name. Thank God my parents gave me 2 middle names, so you can Google me, right?
Okay. So like Bill, it's been a couple of years since I have participated. My research is a little diverse right now. I'm doing working on 2 different papers. One is kind of going in the direction of a business model that I've kind of been observing, which is I'm trying to actually place it within the new business models of like the sharing economy just places. It's kind of a half case study, half scholarly piece of what is this new beast that I've found out there. And another one that I'm doing right now is also I'm working with some professors in Germany, and we are doing interviews with entrepreneurs between the U.S. and Germany to try and determine what types of attitudinal and approach differences we can find between the 2 different types of entrepreneurs. Now, of course, the predication is that Americans just want to make as much money as they can as quickly as they can, and Germans are more interested in building something that they then actually have. That doesn't mean they wouldn't continue to create new things as an actual entrepreneur, but that would be very similar to the value system that would be expected in the 2 countries.
Okay, I'll go next if that's okay. I'm Bonnie O'Neill, and I am from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Marquette University. I'm using X-Culture for the first time, actually, in my organizational behavior class, and I'm super nervous about that. I've been doing team projects in my classes all along, and I'm starting to get a little bored with what I've done. But students really seem to latch on to the global virtual side of it. And so Vaz answered a lot of questions for me early on about whether this will actually fit with an org behavior topic that's pretty heavily team-based. So my research efforts tend to focus on fairness in the workplace, psychological contracts, and so very micro. and looking to understand a little bit more about teams. I'm currently working on a paper with a colleague in the IT area that we collected some data a couple semesters ago on student teams and whether a psychological contract exists within student teams and to what degree students believe those promises that their teammates make, teammates make are fulfilled or not. And so I'm a little nervous about this, but I think it's going to have a really significant impact on the students' learning.
Yep. Thank you, Bonnie. Yep.
Okay, I guess I'll go. My name's Gordon Perchold. I'm here in Singapore, originally from Canada. I've left Canada about 25 years ago, worked in New York for a while, Mexico, but the past 20 years living in 5 different countries of Asia. And now I've been a year in Singapore at SMU. Background is I was a global partner with Deloitte Consulting and decided at a certain point that I was going to consult the rest of my life and decided to give back. So I got the PhD. I teach management of multinationals, which is sort of a derivative of international business. I did international business last year. Yeah, my first time using X-Culture. And I think the students are keen. We'll see how well it plays.
Where in Canada did you live before you left?
I lived in Toronto.
The other, yeah. I lived for 7 years in Calgary, so the other side of Canada. So, yeah. All right. Well, very nice to meet you, Gordon.
Same here.
What else do we have?
Hi, my name is Omar. I'm a faculty at the Youngstown State University from Ohio. So I have been part of X-Culture for probably 4 to 5 years. I use X-Culture both in the US and in Turkey as well. I'm from Turkey. I used to teach in Turkey. In terms of my research, I have like two streams of research. The first one is mergers and acquisitions. I study especially the cross-border mergers and acquisitions. And the second stream is the internationalization of small and medium-sized enterprises. So I look forward to it.
Nice to see you again, Omar. So he is one of the colleagues here whom I've met before face-to-face. So very nice to see you again.
Should I go next?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dina. I met Vas actually at the AIB in Minneapolis, and this is the first time I'm going to use X-Culture. I heard a lot of good things from the conference. So in a way, I knew about X-Culture, but I'd never really tried to use it. So I'm going to use it for the first time for international business management for undergraduates. I teach at St. Anselm College, which is in New Hampshire. So we're primarily undergraduate students. And my background, well, I'm half Czech. I was born in Prague, but half Costa Rican too. So I worked in Europe. I worked in Latin America before, kind of in corporate before getting a PhD in teaching. So I'm looking forward to using this, and in terms of research, so far, kind of my latest research has been on entrepreneurship, but mostly like family business groups. I've been looking at, Central American family business groups and nascent, I don't know, entrepreneurship, kind of these topics are right now my interest. Prior, I did more of FDI and CAFTA, the Central American Free Trade Agreement, and kind of different type of research and shifting to that. So yes, looking forward to working with all of you.
Nice to meet you, Dina. And we have Karen and Krisan. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Yeah, please go ahead, whichever one wants to go first.
Okay, hi everyone. My name's Karen Winter. I'm from the University of Western Australia. This is the first time that we're involved with X-Culture, so we're very excited, and we're actually implementing it for a unit called Consumers Around the World. So yeah, we thought it would be very suitable for this unit. It is a broadening unit, so we always look for sort of experiential learning and activities, so that's why we selected X-Culture.
Nice to
the
meet
students
you.
are all very excited too.
Nice to meet you. And Krisan, am I pronouncing that correctly?
It actually is Krisan.
Krisan.
Close. Good morning, everyone. My name is Krisan, really, and I'm a management instructor at Florida Gulf Coast University down in Fort Myers, Florida. So I work with Dr. Daniel Roddig.
Right. She's very, those who don't know, we have a professor, Daniel Roddig at that university, and he always scores in top 3. So we have a way to score professors basically based on the student performance. And I teach the same course that you guys teach, same days, same time, sometimes 2 minutes, same textbook, same size roughly. I have usually a little bit more. And somehow Daniel's students are always in top 3 across the world. And mine are like first 25% or something like that. So I don't know what he does and how he does it, but he's always one of the very best. So those are big shoes to fill.
Oh my gosh, they are. So I teach the International Business course. I actually have 2 sections this semester that I'm incorporating X-Culture in. I actually started teaching down at Florida Gulf Coast last year. So I've been involved with X-Culture for about a year. So this will actually be my 3rd semester. In terms of my research interest, I'm actually, in addition to teaching full-time, I'm also working on my doctorate. So the area that I'm going to be focusing on for my doctorate is the ethics of artificial intelligence. So I'm actually at the process of working on my proposal for my dissertation. So it's interesting. So a lot of my research right now is in the area of AI, and certainly I've been looking at the global perspectives related to that. In addition to teaching international, I also teach several ethics courses. So this aligns very well with my teaching as well. So I'm excited to be part of X-Culture. I found it to be a really great experience for my students.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And also those who don't know, in addition to all the research we do, there are many PhD students at this time who are using our data for doctoral dissertations. I think we have 6 that have been defended, and there are probably another 6, 7 now currently in development to be defended soon. So again, those of you who either have graduate students or planning to work yourself on a doctoral dissertation, you don't usually have enough time to collect your own data, but we have more data than you would ever need for a dissertation. So
oh, wow, that's great to know. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So I see Arkadish is here. So we met before.
Hello, everyone.
Good to see you.
How are you all doing? Yes. I'm Arkadiusz Moronko. I'm originally from Poland. I spent most of my life in the US, but both on the East Coast, West Coast, and now experiencing Indiana a little bit. So I'm at Indiana University East, and I have lived and worked in the Netherlands for about 4 or 5 years, and in Belgium for a little bit. I have, like Bill, traveled quite extensively for the last 10 years. I've been to more than 50 countries, and to some of them many times over. I have essentially taken more than 1,000 students abroad, like physically traveling. So X-Culture is kind of a great substitute. So I'm not looking forward to seeing next airport or anything like that. So. Yeah. But I still am involved a little bit, and I travel very selectively. So I have done X-Culture for 2 semesters now. It's an awesome substitute for actually being somewhere already. And my research is I look at the flow of foreign direct investment to developing economies. I have looked lately at impact availability of skilled human capital on attraction of FDI, and the latest one I'm looking at the ability of indigenous firms to innovate independently when there is an influx of FDI into some areas within a country. So I don't look at the country level, I look at the within a country, kind of all the way to the city level. Actually, I can go all the way to the zip code level especially in Poland. I look at developing economies, but I have an extensive data set on Poland, so that's what I do. So great to meet you all.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
And I see we also have Daniel and Edgar. No video, but I'm not sure if you can talk. Maybe if you can.
Yeah, I can talk. So sorry, I've been trying to fix my camera, but I couldn't get to didn't work. I'm Daniel Gomez. I'm from AFIT University in Colombia.
Yeah.
I haven't traveled as much as all of you. I spent 5 years in California. I went to high school in California, and now I'm teaching for my first time. So it's not only my first time in X culture, but also my first time teaching. I have a full-time job in a hygiene products manufacturing company, and I'm doing this as an additional job. So I'm really excited. I've heard really good things about X culture. I actually had one of our last semester students talk last week in my class about her experience. She actually got to participate in the second challenge. So I've heard really good things. So I'm looking forward.
EFUT is probably our closest partner in Latin America. I've taught there a few times, and then obviously all the professors. Please say hello to Alejandra and Thomas and Christina and Andreas and whoever else is there still. So
I will.
A lot of partners there, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And Edgar, I'm not sure if you have the sound, if you can say a few words about it.
So good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Edgar Andres from Bogota, Colombia also. I'm working in La Fundación Universitaria Conrad Lorenz here in Colombia. I'm also a new teacher. I'm teaching international management. Basically, about my background, I'm a current entrepreneur. I'm some sort of pioneer in Colombia in the organic field. I have a small fruit company, so I'm been working on a small organization and small farmers, trying to bring those organic fruits into organic premium products and export it. So out of this experience, I've been able to share it with my students, and the university is really interested on this, on learn by seeing a real case of import-export experience, which is the one I'm currently experiencing. Also, I get to live in Spain 2 years. I course a master degree, an international master in Barcelona. I study in London, and I live for 4 years in Montreal, in Canada. So yeah, I really would like to focus on the internationalization of agricultural products. That's kind of my intention with the students. In the first step, just letting know that the challenges of current globalization economies, but also to see the opportunities for Colombia and countries like us, like tropical countries with a high potential in local and in tropical, but not high added value, but we can add the value that we want if we work hard. That's kind of the base of my investigation and my research.
Thank you, Edgar. And I will actually want to talk to you about your business. So I don't think we've ever had a company among the X-Culture Challenges that do organic fruits. And so, well, let's talk about that separately. I'll send you an email right after the meeting.
Of course, sir.
There is a way we can help you or each other. So let's see.
That would be amazing. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you very much.
Well, so very nice to meet you all. Let me get right to business and give you a quick overview first of basically what we're trying to do, and most of you sort of know it. I'll spend only 2 minutes on that. Then I will just go quickly step by step as to what happens next and what to expect, and then maybe some tips as to what to do with the challenges that normally arise at each of those steps. And then maybe a couple words about research that we do and some other non-teaching programs that we have. And then if we have time, and hopefully we will, a little bit about discussion and questions and answers and experience sharing. But first, the main idea, originally it was all about giving our students an opportunity to complete a project with people from other countries. So it was all about allowing students to experience in real life what we sort of teach them in the classroom. So when we tell them that Ukrainians are different or exporting product is difficult, one thing when they just read the book, another thing when they have to do it in a group with people from Ukraine trying to export a product. And so initially it was all about working across the time zones and cultural differences and communicating online. But then in 2013, if I remember correctly, the first big change happened one of our professors from Turkey was doing a consulting project with Mercedes-Benz. They were trying to develop some marketing strategy, if I remember correctly, for Africa and Southeast Asia. And at some point, she brought up the fact that she has access to all these thousands of students around the world. Mercedes-Benz said, oh, that's very interesting. Maybe we can get their ideas. And so they were our first client. It went extremely well. They were so happy that they even organized a meeting. I think we had about 75 students at one of their factories in Turkey, which is apparently one of the biggest in the world. And ever since, we thought, oh, in addition to the cultural aspect, we can actually add the business consultant aspect to it. So ever since, we would select 3, 5, 10, usually actually more like 10 companies that present a real challenge that they have. And then the students, on the one hand, will work in those international teams, but on the other hand, they sort of serve as consultants. So they would meet in live webinars with the company CEOs or owners. They would study the company business, study the challenge, do research, and then try to come up with a solution and write a basically business proposal. And so this way they would begin an experience both in cross-cultural collaboration, but also in business. That change also slightly changed the composition of students that participate. The first few years, it was all international business. Now it's more and more students from courses in entrepreneurship, strategy, and now sometimes even courses like, for example, engineering, and like they have communication for engineers courses, so they sometimes participate. And then we have some interesting courses, like, for example, again, like specifically doing business overseas or something more specialized. And so that serves very well because the way we design those challenges, we try to cover multiple areas of interest. So a client normally asks for advice for how to grow business, and particularly how to expand into new markets. But the kind of complex of questions includes everything from analyzing the competitive position of the client, some sort of a SWOT analysis, market analysis, strength, weaknesses, all that stuff, but then also identifying new growth opportunities, new markets, analyzing those markets, developing a marketing strategy for those new markets, developing an HR strategy, entry mode, finding partners, shipping, logistics, payments. So basically it covers a wide range of topics. And so what that allows us to do is that even when the teams are very functionally diverse, students may be from different major areas, from different courses, there will be probably something that each of them will find that fits very well with his or her course. And so that works very nice. Students' skills complement each other, and at the same time, the clients get a greater variety of ideas. So that's basically the task. As I said, in most cases, the companies ask to help with developing a market expansion strategy, although sometimes the questions are much more specific. Sometimes they literally have a very specific problem and need help with that specific problem. Like, for example, there is a company called Forcier. They specialize in research in Africa. They have participated probably, 7 times, and the reason they will not probably participate this semester is because they have participated so many times that now there are thousands of reports on the web from the previous years, and so that makes it a little bit challenging for us to ensure that students write their own work and not borrow some of those ideas from the previous work. But so what that company wanted help with was basically a recruitment strategy of professionals in Africa. So all the way from how do you find people with a research degree who are willing to go to Africa and do work there, all the way to things like, for example, how much does it cost to hire a bodyguard in Africa, transportation, housing, very, very specific and very interesting for the students. And so in cases like this, in many cases, it's not even the solution that the students propose, it's the sheer number of suggestions that they receive. So when somebody says you can get, for example, a hotel in Lagos for this much, well, that's one thing. But when 100 students did that research and give you each a number, so the average tends to be extremely accurate and close to what the real figures should be. So we have a mix of those challenges, although, as I said, we try to stick with market expansion. It gives us a nice kind of mirror of a standard international business strategy textbook. And it does have strong components in HR, in communication, in marketing, in finance, and logistics, which allows students from other functional areas to contribute in their specific area. So that's the task itself. So far, very simple. Now, in terms of what happens next and what challenges we can expect at those stages. We have 2 tracks, as you know. We have the early track that starts on Monday, and then we have the late track that starts about 5 weeks later. And the reason we have 2 tracks is because the semester starts at different times in different countries. And so by having 2 tracks, we can align the schedules a little bit better within the groups. Historically, in the early track, we have more Latin American students. In the late track, we have more American students, US American students. But overall, we usually can ensure that there would be about 6 students per team. Usually there would be 2 of them from the same country, but from different universities. Like, for example, in the early track, there may be 2 students from, for example, Colombia, but one may be from Medellin, one may be from Bogota, and then everybody else is from different countries. And in the late track, usually there would be 2 American students, US American students, and again, one, let's say, from Hawaii and one from North Carolina, and then a bunch of other countries on top of that. So there will be at least multiple countries on the team, although some students may be closer to one another than other students on the team. And so there are several things that happen before teams are formed. One, we need to get the names and contacts of the students from the professors. For the early track, that process is pretty much over, so we're still waiting, I believe, for 1 or 2 rosters, but more or less we are ready to go. For the late track, some already have submitted rosters, more will submit later. The challenge we have at this stage is sometimes professors, 1, do not provide the student names in the correct format, and 2, do not check email addresses. So for the names, in most cases, we don't know what the name should appear like. And so if it's an American name and there is a mistake in the name, for example, if the name is sent to us as John, Smith, as Smith, John, we kind of know which one is the first name and which one is the last name, and we can fix the problem. But for international names, usually we wouldn't know. And so proper capitalization and then first, last format are critical, because that's how those names will appear in all the correspondence and then on the recommendation letters and certificates. And so sometimes professors don't, fix it, send all the names in capital letters or lowercase or something else. And then obviously, in the end, it leads to the wrong spelling in the recommendation letters, and then sometimes we have to redo a whole bunch of certificates when that error finally is discovered. Same thing with emails. Luckily now most students are using university emails and they seem to work well, but in many countries students are still using Hotmail or Gmail or whatever the local email providers are. And again, sometimes some of those emails turn out to be not working or misspelled. And again, for us, we may not know that until the project starts. So it's very important that the professors send a test email, because otherwise, as I said, the whole process may be delayed. But this is simple. That's technical issues, so easy to deal with. The next bigger step is forming teams. And so we follow 2 rules when we form teams and try to obey them, although sometimes we have to make little exceptions. But the rules are, 1, we always try to keep MBA students or master students separate from undergraduate students. We have done a lot of research, and everything indicates that MBA or master students are not necessarily better than undergraduate students. They do not necessarily write better reports. They do not necessarily are more mature, or at least in detectable ways. But we also found that you mix those 2 levels, and a lot of complaints happen. So MBAs, anything goes wrong, they say, oh, that's because those kids don't do their work seriously enough, or whatever. And then undergraduates say, oh, those MBA students, they're too bossy, they wouldn't listen to us. And again, we know that it's not the case. We know that it's humans, it happens in any team. But here you give this visible marker and something to complain about, and so that creates those fault lines in teams, so we try to avoid it. Although sometimes when we have latecomers, let's say we have formed teams and then we have 15 more students who have just joined, and let's say all 15 are MBA students, and we need to place them on teams, but they are all from 1 or 2 countries, and so we don't have enough diversity, and we need to place them on teams. So in some cases, we may put them on teams with undergraduate students, just because at that time it's a choice between either all from one class, or a diverse team, but some of them would be undergraduate and some of them would be masters. So those things usually, as I said, happen with latecomers, and sometimes it's just impossible to make it any different way. But for everybody else, and usually it's about 95%, we will keep them separate. Also, we started last semester, we started checking for age and for work experience. And we tried to match students on those dimensions too. And again, one of the reasons for that is it creates a fault line when you have some mature students, like older people, and some young kids. On the one hand, it's a good experience because they may have people of different age in the real company. But again, it gives you sort of something that is a visible difference that, you know, people complain about. But also objectively, they usually tend to have different sort of life demands. Those who are 30 and older tend to have full-time jobs, families, kids, and they tend to be on a very different schedule than those who are 19, 20 years old, even if both of them are in an undergraduate program. And then again, I suppose that's a nice real-life preview that in the organization you can have people of different age with different demands, but it seems like sometimes it creates so many problems and so many complaints that it's sort of cheaper to keep them separate and match people roughly by age and by experience. Although it's not always possible, and so there will be many mixed teams, but we try to, you know, at least separate, you know, substantially more mature from the real, you know, like really young kids, and so try to match them on that dimension. Other than that, we just try to maximize the diversity. So we try to have as many countries, as many continents on each team. Again, as I said, sometimes it's possible, and some teams will literally have every team member is on a different continent. And sometimes there will be multiple people from either the same region or sometimes even the same country on the team. But if that happens, we at least try to have them from different cities, different locations, so as far separated from one another as possible. So that's the team forming, and yeah, we'll see how it goes this semester, but my hope is that we will be able to follow those rules, at least in most of the cases. I'm not sure if we should open it for questions or comments right now, or maybe I'll spend 5 more minutes talking and then we will have a discussion. So then once the teams are formed, everything is extremely simple. So the students will get each a personal welcome letter. In that welcome letter, there will be a link to the project resources. The project resources is a page, I think, with 8 items on it, but basically one is a short introduction video, like 3 minutes, about what Xculture is. Another is kind of animation video that kind of tells students what they need to do in order to succeed. Then we have the challenge instructions, and for the early track and the late track, at this time they see last semester's challenges. Many of them will be recycled this semester. I think every single company asks to participate again, but we do have a few new companies, so I'll probably replace some of those just so that we have some variety. And so there will be probably, ideally we would like to have 4 or 5 companies. And the reason we would like to have only 4 or 5 is easier to manage. Second, we do usually 2 webinars with each company, and webinars take about half a day of my time to do. From the time, you know, to schedule the meeting, to send out the invitations, to actually be in the meeting, then to render the video, to post it, even though some of that is helped by my assistants, but it still takes a long time. It's basically more than a lecture. And so when we have 10 companies, as we did in some semesters, and you do 2 webinars with each, and sometimes you do even 3, that's literally more than just teaching a course. So just doing those webinars is basically like 1 extra course, and even more in terms of the time. And so it's hard for us to manage. Second, when you have too many companies, what happens is sometimes some companies are not very popular and end up only with, let's say, 5 or 10 teams that chose them. And then obviously it reflects poorly on us because the client came and spent time and only got 5 reports. But also the quality of the ideas is, you know, the variety of the ideas is not quite there either. And so it's almost better to have fewer companies and go more in depth and give them better quality work, and also have more time to manage each client than to have many and then, you know, for some of them just not do a very good job. And we had some semesters when we had up to 15 companies, I remember. And so that was just too much work, and it didn't seem to have served any purpose. So sort of everybody loses in the end. So we're trying to keep the number of companies low, but then the problem is that so many apply and so many interesting businesses want to participate that it's hard to say no. And so we end up usually with more than we plan, but again, try to keep it manageable. So then students get the welcome letters, the link to the materials, they review the challenges, they review those intro videos, and then they have to do the readiness test. Now, this is very important. So we used to have no test. Now we do have it, and now it's pretty long. And so the readiness test serves sort of two big purposes. One, it's not so much a test per se, it's basically a review of all the key elements or key aspects of the project that the students need to know. It follows literally, the project design step by step and asks questions about each of those elements. Where do you find the deadlines? Who gets to be the team leader? How do you complete the surveys? And so here, by asking those questions and even providing the links where they can find the answers, we sort of guide the students or prompt the students to review all the key elements one more time so that when the time comes to work on the project, they sort of know what to expect. So it sort of ensures that they go through all the main elements either one more time or just at least one time. Second, we used to look carefully at the percent of the questions that the students answer correctly. And we still use it, and officially they have to get 80% or higher in order to pass. So it does check for knowledge and ability to understand questions in English, to ability to, to answer them correctly. But there is one more element or one more statistics that we use and pay attention even more to, and it's been shown to be a much better predictor of future performance. And that is the number of questions or percent of the questions attempted. So we used to completely ignore that statistics, but there is virtually a perfect correlation between incomplete answers and then problems down the road. So it seems like it's not even so much about the IQ and ability to read and answer. It's more about the diligence and willingness to take the time to answer those questions. And so there are many of them. The test takes about an hour, and so there are some students who just give up and don't stop halfway or start answering like everything 1 or everything 2. And so usually that's a big red flag, and usually those are the students who then do not participate in the team activities and then eventually get kicked out from the project. So we pay close attention to whether or not the student actually was willing to take the time to do it, because if not, chances are the student will not take the time to work with the team. So that's another very important selective element. Plus, we also have a test of English. It's only, I believe, 10 or 12 randomly selected questions from a bigger pool, but we do check for that now. So again, it's not a perfect test, but it's the best we can do. And so presumably those who can go through this readiness test, presumably they have enough time, the internet connection works, they can force themselves to read a longer test and answer all the questions, and their English is fluent enough to be able to understand and respond to those questions. Some surprises still happen after, in the end, but normally that's a good indicator that the student is ready. So, and then, once they pass the readiness test on the first day of the semester, for the early track, it will be on Monday. For the late track, it will be October 1st, if I remember correctly. They receive an email where they see the names and contacts of their team members. And from that point on, they basically are ready to participate. So they start with getting to know each other, and then they have weekly deadlines, and all they have to do is just as a team provide those deliverables every week, and then in the end submit the report. One thing that we do differently this semester, we tested it last semester. So it used to be that the first deadline, so every deadline is on Sunday, but the first week we have 2 deadlines. So we sort of force them to get, to start early. By the way, Daniel Roddick, professor from Florida Gulf Coast, was the one who sort of came up with the idea of 2 deadlines in the first week. And that's a good idea. So students start working right away. But it used to be that you have only a few days to get to know each other, and then you get right to business. You have to select the client, you have to select the new market, you have to write the marketing strategy, and so on, week by week. Last semester, we tested giving students more time to get to know each other. So the first deadlines were all about getting to know each other. And actually, that made a huge difference. Peer evaluations went up like by 2 standard deviations. It was like only like 0.3 points on a 5-point scale. But given that the standard deviation is so narrow, it's like a huge jump. So apparently giving students a little more time to get to know each other, even though it takes away time from completing the project, it actually does make a huge difference in how much students like each other, how much they enjoy the project. So this time, again, the first 2 deadlines will be all about getting to know your team and then the business components. So another thing we changed and will continue this, keep this semester, it's been 2 semesters since we've been testing it, again, works very well. The first deadline after they select the client as a team, it used to be then again, it would be question by question. Now, one of the deadlines, first deadlines, we ask every single student on the team to provide their initial first, draft answers to each question individually. So we only ask like, a couple of words, one sentence for each question, but we force students to think about each question individually first. And the reason for that is one of the problems we noticed in many teams is that they would divide the workload by question. So you do marketing, you do HR, you do entry mode, I'll do logistics. And in many cases, they don't communicate. So everybody work on their question separately. And then the hope is that everybody will do their share. And then at the end of the semester, they will copy and paste it all into one report and submit. And in many cases, that doesn't happen. So somebody may not do their share of work. And second, the whole purpose of working in a team is that you collaborate, you exchange ideas, you criticize each other, you come up with those solutions collectively. And so by forcing them to think about every single question individually first, we sort of prompt them to have something to say about every question when the time comes to work on that issue. And so even though there may be someone still responsible, let's say for marketing or for HR, I did think about that in my first deadline. So I'll at least share my thoughts. And so the hope is that that promotes some collaboration. And yes, our data suggests that it does. And so students do communicate more and check at least each other's work or at least share some of the ideas. And then in the end, a week before the deadline, they have to submit the draft. The reason we ask them to submit the draft is one, again, prompting them to have something done a little ahead of the deadline. So this way, if there is a problem, if a section is missing, if something's not right, they will see it ahead of time and will have the time to finish. And second, when they submit the draft, they get a plagiarism report from Turnitin. And so this way, again, if one of the team members copied and pasted a whole Wikipedia article, which happens sometimes, they will see it right away. And so we'll have about a week to fix that problem. And then the final report, and that's basically it. So 2 things that happened during the project that you need to know. One, there will be weekly deadlines. Each deadline is on Sunday. And so students will receive an email, usually on Wednesday, that says, all right, so this week, this is what you have to do. You have to submit your deliverables by Sunday. And then there are always a few more questions about, how your team is doing, any conflicts, is everything fine, peer evaluations, that kind of stuff. Now, what I have to say about that to the instructors is this. Instructors often ask me to send copies of those weekly emails to the instructors. And we used to do it, then we stopped doing it, then we did it again, and now we're not doing it again for this reason. One, when I send copies of those emails to the instructors, about 30% of them, so about 50 instructors, because we have about 150 in a given semester, about 50 of them think that that's an invitation for them personally to do that survey. And no matter how many times I explain, no, that's just a copy, so you know that it went out to students, just for your information. Many of them try to do the survey, then it sometimes doesn't work or doesn't make sense, and then they email me. And it's like 50 emails each week that I have to explain, no, everything's fine, don't worry, just for your information. Second, those emails go out exactly at the same time, usually Wednesday morning, exactly with the same text. It's literally a copy and paste of the same email that says, okay, next week, next deadline, here is your link. Don't forget to do it by the end of the day on Sunday. And so the only difference is the different date, but the rest is identical. So I'll probably send you a copy of that email the first time we send it out. But from that point on, just know that it goes out every Wednesday. And so there is, like if it's Wednesday, it went out. And so you don't really need to get that copy and spam your mailbox. But then also every Wednesday, I send a detailed performance review on every student to all instructors. It's like a gigantic Excel file sorted by instructor, and you can see your class right away, and you can see performance indicators for each week for each of your students. It's like 10 numbers or so for every week. And so when I send out that performance review, I usually send like a detailed email that talks about what had happened last week, what the plans are for the next week, anything else you need to know. In fact, those emails tend to be very long and detailed. but I always include a summary. And so those of you who participated before, usually you don't need to read the long part, you just read a summary. Like, for example, the first point is almost always performance evaluations attached. So you know what it is, you don't need to read the whole description, how to read it, where the important information is. Then it says, okay, this week, deadline 3 due. So again, I'll have a more detailed description further down, but once you see that one line, you don't really need to read the rest. But at the very end, I usually do include a copy of the email that went out that week, and so this way you can also know what's going on. So this way you can see the exact questions in the survey if you want to click on the link and stuff like that. So relatively easy here. And so the final thing that will happen, and this is probably the most important thing that I need to say, is free riders. So I don't know what's going to happen, with the world economy, with the climate, with, I don't know, all the many things that will happen, in this life over the next 4 months. But there is one thing that I guarantee will happen to you. Like, I absolutely guarantee that you will see that. You will hear from your students the good old story that I'm doing all the work and my team members or one of the team member is not doing his or her work. And so here is what I have to say about that, and it's extremely important. And we've done a lot of research. I can literally show you tons of data that support that. So one, you will primarily hear complaints. And if you're participating the first time, you will be under the impression over the next few months that everything is going bad. Because at the end of each class, you will have 2-3 students who will come up to you and they will complain about things. Usually, as I said, it will be that I'm doing all the work and they are not doing much. What do I do? And so that will create an impression that nobody's participating, and you will think, why did I get into this project? I mean, it's not working. So a good antidote to that is just look at the performance data that I send you every week, and you will see that overall peer evaluations are very high and usually between good and excellent. When we ask people how many people in your team are participating actively in the project, you will see that with the average team size, let's say, of 7, the average number of people or the number that students say that are actively participating will be approximately 6.5. So usually it's about half out of 7 who are not participating, but the vast majority are actually doing a good job. And the vast majority of the students are very happy. We ask them, is everything clear? Are you motivated to participate? Are you sure you will be able to finish the project on time? And usually that it's on a 100% scale. It's usually like 80, 85%. So very positive, basically, yes, everything's fine, everything's clear. So the reason it may create an impression that everything's bad is because those who do well, they just don't talk to us. I mean, everything's good. They're enjoying the project. And so those few who are not doing well, they talk to us, and that may create this skewed impression. Second, the problem here is, and we're actually trying to write a paper about that now, is that the way our brain works, basically, self-serving bias, essentially. So the way we see things is we don't really perceive or don't really recognize what we don't see. So we tend to greatly overestimate our own contribution and greatly underestimate the contributions of others. Like, for example, you will see the statistics there. Every week we have peer evaluations. And the last column in the peer evaluation asks a question that sounds like this. Of all the work completed last week, what % was completed by each team member? And you have a list of team members, and they have to give percentages, and it always has to be exactly 100%. So it's automatically programmed to be 100%. When you look at evaluations, peer evaluations by others of percentage of work completed by each team member and add those up, you get roughly 100. So a little bit less, so more like 90%. But when you look at the self-evaluations, so when you add up everybody's self-evaluation on the team, how much they personally did, you get usually closer to 200%, which means people overestimate their own contribution by about a factor of 2. So that tells us that, it's not really that people are bad or selfish or overestimate their own performance out of some sort of malicious intent. It just seems to be a self-serving bias. I mean, it's just how we work. So which means that even if everything is perfect, even when you have a team where everybody does exactly the same percentage of work, everybody on the team will think that I do twice as much as everybody else. And so that creates a nice ground for complaints. And then, God forbid, if somebody doesn't do an equal share of work and actually does a little bit less, then all of a sudden looms like, oh, he's not doing anything. So what I'm trying to say here is that many of those complaints, I'm doing all the work and they're not doing anything, and I do get a lot of them myself, they are just plain unsubstantiated. When we look at the numbers, we know that it's not true. It's not that students align, it's just they have their own impression. So in many cases, it's just not true. Occasionally, it may be true. In fact, occasionally it may be that somebody is not working. In fact, most teams will have one or half on average team member. So every other team will have one who is really not working. But everybody else on the team usually works very well, and usually the problem is not as big as it may appear based on the students' comments. Second, again, extremely important, and that's where I will shut up. When that will happen, so I'm not saying if that happens, when that will happen, it will happen many times. You as a professor have two choices. You have two ways to react to that complaint. And so one of them is extremely bad, like really, really bad. You will do a lot of damage to both your teaching evaluations and to the student experience if you do it. And the other one is very, very good. You will do a great service to the student, and you will greatly improve your teaching evaluations if you do it. So a very bad way to respond to the student who comes to you and says, I have a team member from Ukraine who is not doing much work, or maybe even my whole team is not participating, I'm the only one who's doing the work. What inexperienced professors do, and it creates a lot of problems, they say something like this. They say, oh, you poor thing, I'm so sorry you have such a bad team. Let me talk to us and see maybe we can get you a new team, a better team. So let me see what I can do. And so the problem with that approach is that first, you sort of externalize the blame. And so you sort of create an impression that the student had bad luck. And so you create an impression that it shouldn't happen. It doesn't happen in real life. The student just had bad luck, and you will try to fix the problem for the student. And so, and then the student, obviously, you will not fix the problem. It usually will not get much better, and usually we will not be able to give the student a new team just because the teams are formed. And so the student then will blame you. You promised to fix the problem, you didn't. It's a bad project. Why did I put in this? It's a bad class. It should have not been part of the project. And so, and then basically student doesn't learn anything, and you are in the end blamed for the problems. A much better way to respond to this is to say something like this. You know what, I kind of feel sorry for you that you have team members who are not participating, but honestly, I'm kind of happy to hear that. Because the truth is, it will happen every single time when you participate in a team. So there will be always someone who is not showing up for meetings. There will be always someone who will not do their share of work. There will be always someone who will plagiarize their work. So yes, it's kind of a bad experience for you now, but the whole purpose of the project is to give you a realistic preview of how it is to work with people from other countries. So you will graduate next year, you will work in teams as part of your job, and believe me, it will be exactly the same thing. So here you have a wonderful opportunity to sort of experience it and try to do something about it. As a professor, I don't really care, if you end the project with enemies on 6 continents. Try to do something about it. Try to confront them about that. Try to maybe organize it, take the leadership role. So try and see what works. Even if you fail in the end, I'm still happy. I'll still give you an A. As long as your team submits some report, I'm still happy. That's all about experience. But for you, that's how you learn. So yeah, go and try to figure out what to do about it. So don't worry. As I said, if somebody doesn't participate, maybe see how you can do it with a smaller team. It's a real situation. So yeah, tell me next time how it's going for you, and yeah, I hope you'll find a way to solve it. And so when you say something like this, the student, first of all, the stress level goes down. They realize that it's not bad luck, it's life. Second, they know that you will not be mad if in the end somebody will not participate on the team. As long as they submit a decent report, you are still happy. It's an exercise, it's not a test. And then in the end, they will say something like this. They will say in the teaching evaluations, you know what, it was one of the best courses I've ever taken. It was hard. Some of my team members didn't participate. I was ready to quit. But you know what, looking back, yeah, actually I did learn something. And so that's a much, much better way to approach it. And in the end, as I said, they will say thank you maybe weeks after the course is over, but still it's a much better learning experience. And then in the end, we will send every single student a personal recommendation letter. We used to wait until they ask and then send them one by one, but it's hundreds. It takes time, so not everybody gets a document that is about 20 pages long, and it includes a detailed individual performance review, team performance review, cultural intelligence. They take a test and they will get a report. And then in the end, like a 3-page recommendation letter that talks about the project, what they learned, what the challenges were, how they experienced those challenges and learned how to deal with them, as well as individual performance indicators, and then a recommendation as to whether or not we can recommend a student like this for similar projects in the future. Plus, they get a certificate. Again, here, a lot of good stories when students would go for a job interview, and that certificate changes the whole dynamics of the interview, and they get a job. And that's pretty much it. So that's the end of the project. Later on, we have a symposium, but we'll talk about that separately, and then research, again, a separate topic. But for the project, that's basically it. And I talked too long, but maybe you have questions or comments.
If I may, I just want to follow up on, is that okay?
Yes, please.
On this last point about the students' feedback or saying that others are not participating in the team, I think it's nothing new to us. I've worked for over 10 years with MBA students. They always do it. I call it they buy an insurance policy when they do that, so they can say everybody else did badly. But my main, and it happened also for me with X Culture as well, but I generally tell them, hey, this is a learning opportunity, and step up and go and figure it out. So sometimes students are a bit challenged or taken back, and they come back for maybe a few weeks and saying, hey, I'm still here alone. And as the things progress, they actually get out of their comfort zone, they start working with others, and they are able to solve it. So I don't think this is a big issue, but just managing it, I think it's important. So that's the only thing I wanted to chime in on. Otherwise, I had a good experience with the program.
And we actually do two things when it comes to free riders. So there is a peer evaluation each week. And if somebody gets 2.0 or less, we send a warning to that student. And usually we would have about, out of, let's say, 4,000 in the late track, there would be about 50 students, 40 students who get 2.0 or less. They get a warning. We say, your peer evaluations are too low. It seems like you're not doing much according to our rules. If it doesn't improve, we'll exclude you next week. And of those, probably about 35 will get back on track and do just fine next week. But there may be 4 or 5 students in a given week that may need to be kicked out of the team. Some of them later come and say, I've reconciled with the team, everybody's happy, we check, everybody's happy, we'll place them back on teams. But if somebody is really not participating and we have evidence, record of that, we will exclude them from the project, from the team. Second, we always have latecomers. And so especially in the first few weeks when somebody is not participating or somebody is telling us that some people on my team are not participating, we can add more new team members to the team, and hopefully that will sort of replenish the labor pool. So we cannot move people to new teams altogether just because it's too hard to do logistically, but we can kick out bad and add new team members to the team.
I have a question, as this is my first time. I guess first question, when you send out the weekly challenges, do you actually send it to us as well, just so that the students may ask us clarification about their project or what we think? Or
well, so the challenges or deliverables are described in detail in the project instructions.
Okay, so those are all of them.
That PDF file, so everything is described there, so they know exactly what the expectations of deliverables are for each week. So the only thing that we send to them is an email that is about 1 paragraph, and it says something like this. So this week, or next deadline is due, Sunday midnight. Please see the challenge instructions to see what exactly needs to be submitted here. Here is your link. Please don't forget to complete the survey. That's where you submit your deliverables. And there will be also a few questions about your team. So don't forget to do it individually. And then after week 3, once we start having peer evaluations, there is also a paragraph with the peer evaluation. So as you know, so many people evaluated, did peer evaluations in your team. And here are the results. And then they would see all names and average peer evaluations. We tried not sharing them. We tried sharing only your own. And then we tried sharing everybody's, and so that everybody's led to the reduction in free riding by 52%, if I remember correctly. In fact, we have a paper on that. And so we do it now all the time, so it sort of improves team dynamics. And so they will see peer evaluations. But the text of that is exactly the same, and there is really no description what needs to be done that week. It just says, please go to your instruction challenge and basically see what's due this week. So, yeah.
I may make a quick comment. I just wanted to chime in. Arkadiusz, I think, when I did X Culture about, I'm not sure, maybe it was 4 years ago, I certainly had exactly what you were describing, Vas. The free riders, the complaints, and I guess luckily, I did handle it actually the way you suggested. But I guess It actually is it's a big problem in the sense that I agree. It's going to happen to everyone.
Yeah.
So it's not a big problem if you don't make it a big problem, but it's a big problem because it is very, very prevalent. And you're exactly right. As I said those things, I mean, it calmed down as the semester went on. They felt more and more confident that their team members were doing something, and everybody did fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will even say, so since we have a couple of papers in free writing, so we did a research on the topic, and so apparently the rate of free writing defined as team members not performing to the satisfaction of their team. So it's not necessarily completely disappearing, but not meeting the expectations. And so corporate teams, student teams, it may be up to 30%. So basically 1 in 3 usually doesn't quite meet the expectations. In our sample, again, if you look at free writers as people who get peer evaluations below 2.0 and get kicked out, it's only about like 1.3%. So it's a very small number. It used to be much, much higher, but through experimentation, we found ways to reduce it. And sometimes I even feel guilty. So even though people will complain about problems, and so there will be, as I said, about 1 in 7 who will be, like really, really bad, and then like 1 in 100 who will be so bad that team will want to kick them out. But that percentage is actually lower than reported for all other types of teams. And sometimes I even think that maybe we create an unrealistically rosy picture of the world, because even though students will complain, the reality is even worse. But again, that's something that unfortunately will happen, always impossible to eradicate. And our goal is, as I said, it's not a test, it's an exercise. It's a way to preview the teamwork in international global virtual teams, sort of like a future viewing device. And so if so, then yes, we do give some sort of a preview, because it will not be any different once they do it as part of the job. One more issue that I omitted, grades. So we will send you each week, and then at the end, all kinds of numbers that describe your student performance, peer evaluations, confidence level, satisfaction level, open-ended comments, weekly deliverables. We leave it up to you how you use those numbers. You can have a complicated formula that takes everything into account. Some people say, I will only look at the peer evaluations and quality of the final report. I personally look at weekly numbers just to identify the problems, and if there is a problem, I talk to the student, but use only final peer evaluations as part of the grade. So it's entirely up to you how you use them. We only require 2 things. One, that the project constitutes no less than 20% of the final course grade, so it must be part of the course grade, unless we sometimes have some strange European universities where they say, I'm not allowed to use team-based performance as part of the grade. And so in those cases, we make exceptions, but otherwise it is a requirement. And on average, people assign about 30%, 35% to the project within the total course grade, but some go as low as 20. And then we have many who literally that's the course, like 100% of the grade is the performance on the project. And second, we would like to see peer evaluations to be no less than 20% of the project grade. Again, most people assign 30, 40% to peer evaluations. Some keep it at 20, some say it's all about peer evaluations, it's a little component for the quality of the project. But again, we want that to be a project's a component so that students worry about what their team members think about themselves. The rest, up to you. I recommend to keep it simple and to stress over and over again to your students that it's an exercise, it's not a test. So don't lose your sleep if one of the report sections is not perfect. Don't get upset when one of the team members is not doing a perfect job. Yes, your report may not win the competition, but it's not about a perfect set of answers. It's about the process of writing those answers as a team. And so in my class, I do assign a lot of weight to the peer evaluations. But when it comes to, for example, report evaluation, I say I will read each section, and as long as it's good enough, I'll give you full grade for that section, full mark for that section. And so this way, as long as you do a decent job, you'll get a full component for that. So try to do your best. Try to win the competition. But if something will not be perfect, that's okay. It's more about the collaboration and experience rather than the actual answers. But I do require that they do weekly deliverables. So if they miss a week, that's a big penalty. So I basically say, as long as you do it, you will be fine. And most of the things you do on your own. You don't need a team to submit the weekly deliverables. It's only up to you what kind of peer evaluations you get. It's largely up to you that the report is submitted, because even if some sections are bad, you can still force the team to at least submit what you have. And so don't complain about team members, because your grade basically depends only on your performance. Maybe quality of some report sections are not under your control, but the rest is basically up to you. So don't tell me that you have a bad team, because your grade depends primarily on your own performance. And so that seems to take away some of the stress and improve satisfaction in learning. So, but again, up to you how you want to manage it. So yes. Avinash, I see we have a new participant. Yes, please go ahead.
Well, I have a question. I don't know who.
Okay, well,
Gordon again. Yeah, and end of the term of it, I have 135 students, so I'll have to mark 135 reports. Is that correct?
Yes, if you have 135 students, yes, that's 135 reports. I sometimes
time frame. What's the time frame that you want to turn around?
Well, so yes, the rule is that professors have to evaluate the reports from the teams that their students were members of. And so some of us may have only 10, 15 students, so that's 10, 15 reports to evaluate. Some may have 130. I had semesters when I had more, so up to 2. Normally, we say 10 days after the final deadline. The truth is, and maybe I shouldn't even say that, but the truth is that there are always people who need a little more time. And so I guess, end of the semester, other obligations. So usually we would like 10 days, 2 weeks is still okay. When it comes to report evaluations, different professors do, the quality varies dramatically. We have some professors who do an outstanding job evaluating the reports, for example, as measured by the quality of feedback they provide. Not only do they have numbers that strongly correlate with the averages, which tells us that they probably, thoughtfully evaluated the report, but they also provide sometimes literally pages and pages of feedback. And then unfortunately, we would have out of 150 professors, there will be probably 5, 6 that will never even submit the evaluations, and we will usually not invite them to participate again. There will be another maybe 4 or 5 who will submit the evaluations, but everything will be 7 and the feedback will be good job. And so again, that's almost as bad as not doing it, because you know that they probably didn't read it. I guess even with professors, PhDs, highly motivated people, you still have some free riders. So that happens. And then the other 140 or so will do a great job and provide detailed feedback and numbers. And so, yes, ideally would like to have it sooner rather than later, but if you have a large class, understandable, it may take a little more time. We will be asking for the emergency reviewers, so especially those who have smaller classes, often volunteer to do a few extra. And we have a large group of coaches, so usually about 50 of them. They help too. So if it looks like some professors are falling behind, we usually try to provide help. So, but yeah, that's basically. And then once we have all of the evaluations, we merge them and we share them. So you will see what everybody else gave for the same reports. You can see how your evaluations compare to others. I try not to share it too early, because then again, there is always a risk that somebody may literally take the averages and say, that's my evaluations. But at least we try to share them usually about a week, the first draft, after the project is over, and with those who already submitted their own evaluations. And then a few days later, the rest with everybody else.
Right, and Vas, do you get the companies to evaluate the reports as well as part of the grading, or I know you ask for feedback from them?
Yeah. That's a very, very difficult question. In fact, I'm now in the process of talking about that with the companies that will be participating this semester. The truth is that, yes, we would like the companies to provide the feedback, but it's technically virtually impossible. So each company will have on average about 100 or so reports, and some will have 2. If you try to print it, we are talking about like literally this much paper. And so, those are, we usually talk to the CEOs, company owners, top managers. They're busy people. And if they were to read the whole thing and provide feedback, it would literally take them, they would have to quit the job for a week and then, do nothing else. So some companies do take time to provide feedback, and we always send it back to the teams, though in most cases they would provide general feedback. They would say, I looked through those 100 reports, and here are my general impressions. So these are some of the things I liked. Thank you, team 125. Thank you, team 455. Interesting ideas. Here are some of the problems that I saw in almost every submission, and a couple of comments. But we don't usually get many details from them just because it's too much work. What we do with them is we have the coaches, as I said, and the coaches would go through the reports and provide executive summaries to the clients. So they would have like a 10-page document or so that summarizes all the main ideas, provides average numbers, average, most common recommendations, some more interesting ideas. and they send that to the company. And then in many cases, the company would provide feedback on that, again, generic summary. And so in some cases, we would always have the links to the actual reports where the ideas came from. So they may read some reports in full. And so in some companies take it very seriously and provide more detailed feedback. But most of them, as I said, I would be even honest with you, it almost seems to me that at least some companies don't even read those reports. Once they get a whole stack, it's so many that they're like, whoa. So, and that's why we give them the executive summary, just because so at least they get something out of this. But then again, some read very diligently, and we even had companies that literally would appoint one of their middle-level managers whose job is to read the whole thing and then basically communicate all those findings to the management. So it's very different. So, yeah.
Okay.
What we do with companies is the second webinar, and sometimes we do the third webinar. That's when we select several teams that present their work to the companies, and then the companies provide kind of feedback in real time. So they would watch the presentation and say, okay, let me say what I think about that. And so when we do it 3-4 teams, even though it's not all of the submissions, but at least those tend to be more or less typical, ideas and problems. And so that gives some feedback. But in many cases, it's hard to recruit students who are willing to provide that presentation a week before the deadline. They seem to be afraid that the ideas will be stolen by other teams, and then some are just simply not ready yet. And so in many cases, when we do that, what happens is only like 1 or 2 teams volunteer to do the presentation. And then we would just literally look through the submissions for the last few weeks and try to provide a summary in that webinar, and then the company provides some feedback. So, but yeah, that seems to be the best we can do with this sort of setting. All right, so 2 more things. Oh, yes.
No, I just wanted to ask a quick question, and because I know that the emphasis has pretty much been on companies. Have you ever thought about working with governments and or NGOs? I mean,
yes.
just as a concrete example, and Bill could probably back me up here. Erie, where we are, is trying to do an economic turnaround. And there might be some very interesting topics that would be, good for a simulation or an activity like this.
Yeah. Yes, and yes, and yes. So yes, we've had non-businesses. Like, for example, last semester they participated and they're asking to participate again. So we'll probably let them run one more time. The city of Nashville, so the greater area Nashville Chamber of Commerce. So they're desperately trying to attract investment from overseas to the city and to the area. And so the challenge is basically, yes, where the investment can come from, how do we advertise there, how do we let them know that Nashville is a good place to invest? So basically, how do we attract business? And so I just got an email literally yesterday asking, they're asking if they can participate again, and I think we will include them. And the reason for that is because some of the participants in the project are not from business schools. They would be like public administration, for example, or political science or economics, and they almost seem to like those better. And so, yes, if like, for example, areas, you said your own location, if they would like to participate, by all means. So definitely a lot of interest. They were very popular. Many students chose them as a client. Incidentally, this November, we have the X-Culture Symposium in Nashville. So Nashville Chamber of Commerce will be one of the hosts. We will visit them. We will meet with them. So some of the teams will literally see their clients face to face. So yes, yeah. And if you know of any other companies, maybe as you said, NGOs, or maybe some sort of, I don't know, social entrepreneurship, it would be interesting to have them on the list. So ideally, we'd like to have a variety of sectors. And so that would be very, very interesting if you have leads or if you have contacts. Yeah. Avinash, did you want to ask a question? I saw you raise your hand. I think we don't hear you if you're talking, so your microphone may be muted. Yeah, no sound for some reason. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe if you type your question and then I will read it. So if you want to try to do that, like you can type it in the comments. 2 more things that I will mention meanwhile. One, symposium. So we do 2 symposia a year where we invite our best students. We just had one literally a few weeks ago in Italy, a wonderful event. We had 150 students, I believe. 30 countries, and then we had about 40 professors. So we had 5 companies that hosted the event. So we met with those companies, visited, saw how they make. One makes coffee grinders. Like if you go to Starbucks, the equipment there is from the company in Italy that we visited. Another one made light bulbs, industrial lighting. Then another one was making coffee. Then the opera as the kind of cultural company. And I'm missing one, wine company, and shoes, a company, one of the biggest manufacturers of shoe soles. So they make shoe soles for like the US military boots, for Adidas, like all kinds of companies. And so wonderful event, nice, charming city. So a lot of students crying when finally it was the time to go home. So great thing. And so we did one of those also in Miami last year. Next year it will be in Canada, in Calgary, and then a year after it will be in Grenada, the country Grenada in the Caribbean region. And then in November, we have another one in collaboration with the Academy of International Business. That one tends to be smaller. We usually limit number of students to 50, and that one is primarily for students who want to go in the academia. So basically students who are thinking about doing a PhD degree. So that one is much more research oriented, whereas the one in the summer, it's all about business. And so usually students who do well get invited to those meetings. It's sort of merit based, so we always have more applications than we can accommodate. But students who had high peer evaluations, good comments from the team members, so they usually have a good chance of being selected. And so we do provide a few travel stipends, but in most cases we don't have enough money for everyone. So what we do is we provide very strong support letters to potential sponsors. So students can give us names of potential sponsors, a city, university, and so on. And we will try to write letters, personal letters to those sponsors. And in the end, it seems like pretty much everyone who attends gets some sort of sponsorship from someone. So this year we had a few students from another Italian city that the mayor of the city sponsored the whole class. Then many students sponsored by the university, some by employers. So that stuff. And then another one, research. So research is a big component of X-Culture. We collect a lot of data. The data are primarily on what's going on in the team. So from team size to attitudes, to conflicts, to communication, interactions, who's the friend, who's the leader, cultural intelligence, cultural values, personality, skills, knowledge, IQ, all that kind of stuff. Everything approved by the IRB here at my school, plus we have a few IRB approvals from other schools where people went through this. So if you study teams, we have just about anything you can think of. At the same time, the task, as you know, is all about strategy. So the task itself is basically strategy and entrepreneurship. And so we've had professors who did studies on, like for example, entry modes. So how teams select entry modes, is it cultural, is it bias, is it something else? So there is room for research of that kind. And lately, we actually started doing more and more research with people from information systems and IT departments. Apparently, for them, it's a big topic, IT-mediated communication. And so they do a lot of research. And so we have some interesting projects going on at this time. And so when it comes to research, there is one more thing that we did this summer. So we had 3 research hackathons. So one was in Wisconsin, where there were about 12 professors. We came there for 5 days, I believe. And we literally switched off our phones, locked ourselves up in a dormitory, and nonstop for 5 days we're writing papers. And so a team of 11 people wrote, almost finished 4 papers. They still need some work before they can be submitted, but we were able to go from the initial pool of ideas to selecting the most promising ones, identifying co-authors, running analyses, and then it was like a 1-hour cycle. You go, you run analyses, and then you present it to the rest of the team, get feedback, criticism, go do some more, and then back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So by the end of the project, you basically have a whole study. And then we tried 2 more formats, one 5 days, 2 hours a day as part of a bigger conference, and then 1.5 days, nothing else, but only 1.5 days. And so those were able to lead to a very clear idea what kind of study you want to do. You know who your co-authors are, you have the research design, but now you have to go home and actually do the study. So you were able to get only as far as developing a very detailed plan, but now you still have to do the work. So it was not enough to do it in those 1 day, 1.5 day, or 2 hour slots over 5 days. So if any of you want to do research, a lot of stuff happening there, and we probably will have data for you, and if not, we may be able to collect more data next semester. All right, anything else? It's more time than I planned, but hopefully that answered most of your questions. So, all right, well, thank you for your attention. As I said, it will not be easy at some point, and it will be maybe even overwhelming in the next few weeks. But I guarantee you that in the end, after everything's done, when you will start getting the thank you emails from your students and when you will see the comments in your teaching evaluations, you will actually think, oh, you know what, yeah, it actually was good. And students seem to have liked it. And yes, it was hard, but students in the end appreciate that. And yeah, let's do it again. So and then hopefully we'll meet some of you at those symposia in Canada, Grenada, Nashville, and whichever ones are coming up. All right, well, thank you so much. Any other comments?
Thank you, Vas.
Yes. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Vas.
Thanks, Vas.
Yes, hope to meet you face to face sometime soon.
Yes. Nice meeting everyone.
Дякую.
Thank you. Дякую.
Thank you.
First, we'll have to catch up.
Let me.
Talk
There was
face-to-face time.
one more question that was there, so let me see it. Yes, so you're free to leave, but there was a question about what's the best way to integrate the project. Yes, usually it's a good idea if it's a face-to-face class, it's a good idea to devote a few minutes of each lecture to the project. And again, warning that when you say, okay, so how's it going? There will be 2-3 students who will say that it's not going so well. And so it's very important to then say, well, anyone else actually has a good experience. And then there will be 25 hands that say, oh, no, I have a good experience. So that balances it out. But yes, the complaints that you will hear tend to be typical ones. And so addressing them in the class sort of answers many questions for everyone. And yes, so those who are in the late track, somebody's asking, it's October 1st? Yes, it is October 1st, but what needs to happen before then is you need to send us the names of the students. Once we have the names of the students, we will send the welcome letters. So if your semester has already started, we can send them out like literally this week. So there is no need to wait longer, so they'll have more time. And then until the start of the project, nothing else will be happening. So we basically will wait for the students to complete the readiness test. But then once this project starts, we form the teams, and from there on, they are ready to go. And yes, some professors would have literally some whole course sections, lectures that they would devote to the project, like maybe once every month or so. If you can do it, it's perfectly fine. It's a little trickier if you teach the course online. So I try to send weekly updates to each student and basically say, okay, this is what's happening and this is your personal peer evaluation. So you can do that as well. And I think that's all of the questions that we had. Yes. So thank you so much.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.